okay, parents, if you've ever broken into a sweat when your child asked, "Where do babies come from?" Or if you've panicked and mumbled something about the birds and the bees, this episode is for you. Today, I'm joined by the incredible author, Michelle Mitchell, author, educated, author educator, and the woman who has somehow managed to make talking about puberty and sex with children almost feel normal. Michelle's books are honest, they're age appropriate, and they navigate the tricky terrain of adolescence, full of the stuff we wish we knew how to say without turning into a hot mess. We're talking body changes, big questions, and all of the awkwardness that comes with growing up, both kids and parents. Michelle's got the wisdom, the warmth, and thankfully the sense of humour to guide us through it all. So whether you're gearing up for the talk or knee deep in it, grab your headphones, maybe a cup of coffee, and get ready for it. Because today we're talking about the talk. Let's get into it. Welcome, Michelle.
That was amazing.
Did you like that?
That was amazing. That deserves some kind of Academy Award. That's just like, can I borrow that for a short page? Or that is winner. That is brilliant.
I will record that for you and you can put that on your webpage.
I will credit that to you. Belle, that's so cool.
Now, Michelle, you've written some hugely popular books on puberty and sex ed for kids. What inspired you to write on such tricky topics?
Well, I was just in schools teaching for 20 years on this topic, found what worked, what didn't, and I didn't want to die with my best jokes buried in some kind of folder. I wanted to get them into parents' hands. So these books to me are all about connection, and I'm trying to bring to the forefront things like validating kids' emotions, like humour that opens their heart, like inviting questions and conversations. And I get emails all the time that these books are actually helping parents connect. And I think it's because the things that I know that open kids' heart are really driving the content of these books. These books could be written about anything. And really what's underneath them is helping parents and little ones, or 8 to 12-year-olds, have a deeper bond and talk about the things that matter to them.
Yeah, and we know knowledge is power, right? And why not give that power to the children to have an understanding of human biology and what they're going through?
Absolutely. And I think we didn't get that kind of chat in the same way that kids need it today.
Yeah.
And it's notoriously awkward for parents. So many parents are like, at what age do I talk to them and what do I tell them? And, they don't want to mess their kids up and they don't want to overexpose their kids. And that's what I really found, even in a classroom setting. I'd have 30 kids in front of me and some kids were asking really curious, deep questions and other kids were looking out the window going, la, 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 every child was different. And so it was striking that balance of getting, enough information in there that they weren't overexposed, but they were well informed to handle what they needed to handle in grade 5 or grade 6 or grade 7 where they were at.
Perfect. And what was your teaching? What subject were you teaching, or was it in a classroom as their school teacher?
Well, I've had such a diverse career, Belle. So I taught in a classroom for only 4 years, and then I started a charity and I had a psychology clinic. I worked with kids at risk of dropping out of school. So I worked with kids in all sorts of trouble. But on top of that, I did a lot of presenting in schools. And a lot of that was to do with sexual health. Even last week, I went and talked about consent to a group of year 12s. So I had 80 grade 12s in front of me. And it's so interesting reading the room with grade 12s. And even though you've got 80 in front of you, it's like you're looking into their souls. You can see every face and you can see that none of them have had the same relationship experiences. And some of them have had better education than others. And it is
Was it a co-ed school?
Co-ed school, yeah.
All together, boys and girls in that room.
That's my preference. And
Perfect.
It's great for smashing stereotypes, for building, I guess, better relationships between boys and girls, for having them support each other, and recognising that they do need each other in this world, and they need each other in a different way. So it's my privilege and pleasure. But when you look into those kids and what they're going through at that stage in their life, about to head to schoolies and out into the world, and a lot of them, partying quite heavily at that age and experimenting with all sorts of things, you really see whether they have had that grounding of education, and a lot of them can't tell you what consent actually is, and I am sure have some big misconceptions about sex and have been taught about sex from the internet rather than from a trusted adult.
Exactly. I must admit, when my first went off to schoolies and her friends were all over, I did give them the talk.
Yeah.
I gave them the chat.
And you do it in different ways at different stages of their life. So in the grade 12s, I was just like, sex has a beginning, middle and an end, and it's all sex because it will all affect you. And they just looked at me stunned, And
well, you're talking the truth. You're talking reality.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, that's a great way for you to start, with a teaching background, psychology background.
I'm not a psychologist. Now, that's important to note. I'm not a psychologist, yes. But I had a clinic. Yeah.
You had a clinic, so you were solidly around people who know the human psychology.
Yeah.
Now, was there a moment in your life with your own children that made you realise that you need to talk more openly as well? Yeah. Did you have an experience at home?
It's interesting because I've asked them what they remember about our conversations, and they have no recollection of one moment where we sat them down and talked to them about this, which I'm actually quite proud of, because it must have just happened quite incidentally and naturally.
Organic.
They mustn't have had this traumatized experience where they got this big chat. And I think that's what it's meant to be, these micro moments and these sort of, these small incidental chats. And I always encourage parents to make a list, of things that you want to talk to your kids about, and just add them to those drives and chats, and while you're eating the burger.
Drives are good. Drives are great. Yeah, no eye contact, just all talk.
I agree. But I kind of do feel like we did have a moment with both of our kids where there was that information update. And when your child is ready for an information update, because you've talked to your child ever since they were small about their body. It's amazing that questions that you've answered when even they're 3 or 4 or 5 about a pregnant woman or breastfeeding or their little sibling or whatever it be. So you're teaching them about sex all the time. But there is an age, and it's normally around 9 when they come home with those questions. They're like bombshells, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they ask you, maybe in front of someone, or when you're about to go out and you're like, oh my gosh, I need a minute to think about
Let's come back to this one. Now, do you actually remember, I should turn my little phone. Do you actually remember the talk you had?
No.
With your mum and dad?
I think they dropped a book on my bed and ran for their life and hoped that, we'd.
Was it the same book that I had? The Swedish one?
With the one where the parents had the cover over them and you never know what they were doing underneath?
This was more visual. I think it was Swedish. I think it was called Where Do Babies Come From? And it was traumatic.
Well, this is the update. We've got to give it a bit of a zhuzh,
Yes. Oh, I completely remember the talk. Now, let's talk about your books. What make them different? What makes your books, and I'm speaking about the sex ed book, what makes it different to the other children's books about the birds and the bees?
Yeah, it's not a picture book. So this is 256 pages, and sometimes we think the chat is just talking about the birds and the bees and maybe, assisted reproductive therapies. But this one's not. It's got more about identity. It's got more about the difference between just your birth story and your family story. This has got a whole chapter in the beginning about being the boss of the book, which is really my way of talking to kids about consent and opening conversation with their parents or their trusted adults. and helping them identify who are the trusted people in your life that you are going to have dialogue with this about. So I'm hoping to wrap around not just technical information, but the values kids need to have these conversations. And I've also added a whole chapter about facts, about babies, growing in the womb, and there's lots of comics and fun stuff. But I found in schools that boys particularly loved asking questions about umbilical cords, and
belly button. What's my belly button?
Absolutely. All this more medical information, but they were fascinated about twins.
Yeah.
And,
Oh, wow.
Triplets and, how all that happens.
The egg splitting or two coming out. But, just the other day, my son was asking about the belly button. And then I was telling him about the umbilical cord. And then he got our little dog and he's like, oh, does she have a belly button? I said, well, pretty sure she would. And they were looking on her body, looking for it.
Yeah. So penis and vagina stuff, this is 5 minutes of the talk to me, because then they're going to ask about life and birth and all this beautiful, a lot of women are going birth, beautiful, but a lot of this
it is fantastical.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, for sure. And what's the funniest question that you've heard and had been asked about sex or puberty?
Oh, now that these books are selling a lot, I get emails all the time, and let me tell you, they are a crack up. I can tell you questions, but I can tell you the last email that stuck.
Okay.
How is that one?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
My mum brought the boys' puberty book and she left it on the bench because she was trying to do this soft introduction. So her son came home and he went, what's that? And she goes, oh, it's just a book I bought for you. And he looked and he goes, I already know about puberty. And she said, oh, what do you know? She goes, well,
tell me.
Oh, yeah. Well, when I get my puberty, I'm going to bleed from my penis once a month.
Oh.
So they come with all these misconceptions. Yeah. And what I know about kids who are 10, they walk around the playground talking about this stuff with no degree of accuracy. And they believe each other. This is the problem.
Yes. And that's a great one, because it just shows they're talking about it. They're talking about menstruation, but getting confused as to which sex receives that. And the other day also, the boys in year 7 got the HPV injection at school. Yeah. And that was a really good one to explain to my son what it is for and what it, how it protects the girls when they're older and what the boys can carry. And and he just took that and was like, okay, cool. He was happy with the response about what that injection is for.
You've just brought up such a good point there, Belle. You've answered his question. Shut up. And then if he didn't have any other questions, he's satisfied. He's got the information he needs for his life moment.
Yeah. And he asked, do I have it now? Do I have that that infection? Well, it's not an infection, it's a virus. Do I have that now? I said, no, because you're not sexually active. When you become sexually active, there's a chance you could get that, and then there's a chance that could forward onto a female, and then she could get cervical cancer. So I don't know how accurate that is, but that was enough for him to understand the importance of protecting both the boys and the girls from this virus.
Have a look at that up and make sure you've given him the accurate answer.
Yeah, I will. Maybe we'll go through that together.
Yeah, look at it. And then make sure you've given, because that's a really important point for him to understand, because he's asked you the question. And sometimes we don't have all the answers in the moment and we're trying to go on the fly.
Yeah.
But when they ask those questions, you've done a beautiful job of answering the best you can. When your inner nudge goes, oh, maybe I didn't do that quite right, make sure you have the right facts. That's why resources are great. But then stop talking, because sometimes I feel like so much of this topic in the past has been driven by our fear. And so we've wanted to download maybe a lot of information on kids, maybe too early, maybe beyond what they're ready to handle. And it's just been a little bit of one of those areas where we've just got to make sure it's fun and at their pace and very child-led. That's what.
And it's about the delivery, for sure.
It is. It's got safety, joy, and choice. They're three things I fall back on.
Safety, joy,
choice.
Love
so
that.
When kids are like, too much. I always say to kids, if this is too much for any reason in my classes, You are allowed to stand up and walk out. You don't have to put up your hand. It is okay.
Yeah.
And I very rarely have kids walk out. Occasionally, when we talk about periods, a boy will walk out. And
Really?
I think that is okay.
Yeah.
Because what will happen, a teacher will meet him outside and they will be able to have a conversation one-on-one that he will
Check
receive
in.
at his level better than in a group setting where he was feeling overwhelmed. Because stress is the enemy of learning. And we've got to realise that. We can't shove this stuff down kids' throats. And a resource enables them to dip in and out when they're ready.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And so we have kind of touched on it. So if a child today says to a mum or a dad one of those tricky questions, how should they respond in the moment?
If you don't know the answer for something, is that what you mean?
So, yeah. So let's say I have never had a chat with my 6-year-old and they come up with a question and I feel a little bit of shock.
Yes.
Should I sit down with them and explain it then and there? Or if I'm a bit nervous, should I say, look, we're going to get some information and sit down together a little bit later today?
You just answered that beautifully. Like,
Yeah,
parents
that's what you do.
Like really, perfect the poker face. Once your kids get to about 8, they get really good at reading your social cues, so your verbal body language. So they're going to tune into that a lot more. So when they ask you a question, you got to ask yourself, who is this awkward for? Is this awkward for my child or me? If they've asked you, it's probably not awkward for them, So you've got to go perfect the poker face. If you don't know the answer, then all you've got to say is, do you know, that is such a good question, but it's so good that I want to give you the best answer I can possibly
one-on-one.
Yeah. The best answer I can possibly give you. So you're thinking safety, joy, choice. So you go choice. So would you like to, you and me, just meet together? Let's go. You know how kids love times? I reckon we should do 7:10 tonight, right? Like when they're that age, they just love the accuracy of
counting down.
7:10 tonight. What, your bedroom or back deck? Which one do you think? And then you're giving the safety, joy, and choice, and give yourself a little bit of time to gather your answer.
And what about silence? So what if there's a child who maybe perhaps is a bit shy and doesn't ask the questions? Does that mean that they're not curious, or are they too nervous to ask?
Beautiful. This can be really anxiety producing for kids. And I think it's actually really important to acknowledge that and respect that. You could say something like really acknowledge the elephant in the room and say, like, I can understand that this could be really uncomfortable. Tell me how you're feeling right now, and if you feel like that's an appropriate question for your child. I like to say it like this. If you've got a girl who's got her period's coming any day and she's like, la, 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 we're not talking about this, you're going to be the mama who leads the way and you say, honey, I know how awkward this feels for you. What could I do to make this conversation easier? You bribe me, right? Safety, joy, choice. So make it as fun as you can. And that's part of the book bossery section I've got in chapter 1. But I've got in there surely a raise in your pocket money is not too much to ask. Surely, I've got all these stupid, really fun things.
Yeah.
But also you can say to kids, maybe we could talk for 5 minutes and then 5 minutes tomorrow. So you're taking it in these baby steps so it's not getting overwhelming. The moment kids' eyes start rolling back or, they're turning their back on you, you stop talking and you acknowledge the feeling. Because stress is the obstacle to learning.
Yeah. And the other thing that sometimes I will do when I want to bring up an uncomfortable topic, I might say something like, hey, I read this article the other day, and then I will speak about that.
Yeah.
And then wait.
And just that's beautiful. Or even their friends, you could say, I think maybe your friends might be learning about this. So you're third personing it as well.
Yeah.
So the problem is, Belle, is we wait too long for these topics. So you're actually talking about their body.
Yeah.
If you get in a little bit earlier, parents, any parent listening,
It's about our bodies.
yeah, it's about like our bodies. It's not personal information right now
Yeah.
when they're 8, but when they're 10, 11, and like they're starting to get underarm hairs, you're talking about something that feels highly personal to them. So if you get in a little bit earlier, it's very normal. It's just facts. They're delivering it as
Absolutely.
facts, not as such sensitive personal information.
And, you know, I just thought of this now. Probably shouldn't say it, but I'm going to. But I grew up as a good little Catholic.
Yeah.
And in the church, you hear that Mary miraculously conceived the Son, right?
Yeah.
And that's how a baby was made. And I
Yeah.
remember, and I did know, because remember, I did have that traumatizing book given to me at about 6 years of age. So I
Wow.
did know that. But then there was the juxtaposition of the Catholic Church and how the miracle, baby Jesus. And I remember thinking, oh, okay, that's a good out for me. If I ever accidentally get pregnant and I'm not married, it was a miracle.
That is, and one of the questions kids ask me, a little bit off topic, but very similar, and I find it's more girls, is there any other way to have a baby? Like, except that happening. And I say to them, honey, I want you to know that never, ever, and this is in the book, that never, ever has to happen to your body unless you want it to, and it always is your choice.
This is
And
consent.
So this is something you get to decide when you are much, 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 and I think it's written 10 times, older.
Older.
Yeah. And your body and your mind's not even ready to make up that decision yet.
Yeah.
But Mel, I think you raised a really important point. When sex is not associated with joy and pleasure, and in the context that it's designed to be part of a relationship that's healthy, and that even like in that traditional context of marriage, there can be a lack of consent, that it can be not a joyful relationship, and sex can be unpleasurable.
Yeah.
That's what I talk to these grade 12s about as well. It's like smashing some of those concepts, because the important part of it is two people who know their own mind and are making those choices.
Yes. The other thing is when a child walks in, just coming to my mind, memory in my own life, when the child walks into an unlocked door of their mum and dad and sees something. Do you touch on that?
I don't, right? If you go into your room, your parents' room, and no, I don't actually touch.
Knock first.
Yeah, well, you should lock the door. That's your responsibility as parents.
There you go. There's the answer. Belle, you should have a lock on your door. I do remember my 12-year-old saying to me, oh, you two should get a hotel room.
It's on you, Belle. That's on you.
That is on me. There you go, parents. Locks on doors. Now, what should a child know? Give me a little roadmap. 5, 8, 10, and 12. Just basic information for a 5-year-old, and then ranging up to the 10 to 12.
All right, let's take that one at a time for me, okay? So 5, you're talking about body parts and you're using correct names. Okay, you're talking about the parts of their body that are in their underwear and in their swimsuit being their own private parts that nobody else should touch, that type of thing. And you're answering any questions that they have in the most factual, straight sense way, and picture books are great. You know, anything that, you know, you can get for that age group that gets past your spidey senses, that feels right to you, I think is healthy, you know.
I love that. And the other one for the 5-year-old is if the mum and dads jump on Braveheart's website, there's also information on there on My Body is My Own, and I think that's
get a lot of
great idea
yes
for little kids to know. And I think this is the line that Bravehearts will use. There is nothing that you can't say to me. There is nothing that you can't tell me. No secret is so big that you can't tell me. And that comes from a place of
that's right.
My body is my own.
And should we say
Ownership.
there's safe secrets and not safe secrets? That's something that you start to talk to kids about when they're maybe a little bit older, when they can tell the difference between safe secrets and not safe secrets. A safe secret might be keeping, granddad's 50th birthday party secret. An unsafe secret might be that, your friend, is stealing money from the shop, down the road. But, you can head into sexual things as well. So it's a framework for those things.
So that's nice and young. Now let's jump forward a tiny bit.
The other thing with that is, when you're looking a little bit older or even younger, those kind of pet names that we use for body parts, when, unsafe people, pedophiles, might be looking to groom a child, they can really tell whether a child is educated or has a trusted adult who's talking to them regularly about their safety by the words a child does or doesn't know. So that's a very important part in protecting a child. So if a child is calling their body parts by those names, like pet names, it's a very different ball game for a pedophile than a child who knows their accurate body parts.
Absolutely.
It's one of those signals. So it's a really good thing to do. So good point, Belle.
Yeah.
8, to me, let's bring up that word information update that we used previously. Their brain's starting to work differently. They're moving from cognitive development kicks in. So they're going from that kind of really step-by-step factual concept of the world to just starting to move into more complex thinking. And what happens in that period of time is they're going from hinging everything on our values, and everything we say is like, God said it. They absorb it all like it is accurate information. From there till high school, by the time they get to high school, they will dehinge from us being the only source of information to being one of the sources of information in the world that they are assessing and finding their own mind about. So when you're talking about between 8 and 12, what they need to know, what I'm thinking more than anything else is taking a step back from that and saying, the way my child thinks is going to change in that time. So 8 becomes such a vital time to give them an information update where your values are stamped all over it. So you're preparing them for the teenage years so they know not only accurate information, but also where your family stands values-wise around that information. Because as they grow, they're going to actually start to notice what that family thinks and what that person thinks and what that political party thinks and what that person thinks. And they're going to compare what they have been taught in their home to that range.
The outside. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's what you've got to understand. So you're actually putting down a very solid case now. You're laying those foundations very solidly now. So 8 is for me the time to answer all the basic questions they've got, but the more important thing is stamping your values around everything that you give them.
Yeah.
When I talk to kids about, say, condoms, right, I think, how can I stamp values around condoms? And this is what I say. Now you know what a condom is. That means that you're old enough to look after other kids. If you ever saw something like that lying in the playground or in the street, you would know what that was. Yeah. And now your job as a big person, knowing that information that grade 1 kids would not have, your job would be to go straight to a trusted adult and actually let them know, because those things would carry germs that are called
diseases.
And that's my inroad to talk to them about STIs. So you're trying to give them the real world application, because, I mean, really, what do they need a condom for at 9 years old? Yeah?
Yeah.
But you're trying to give them a real world application, because kids at that age have got to hang it on something real because they're concrete thinkers. You are giving them a real world application for something really quite abstract for 9, 10, 11. I mean, what do they
Yeah.
need a condom, like, except to, like, have the information in the playground? You've got to give them something to do with that. So it's to protect younger kids, to act in a place of an emergency. It's to know what to do in the playground as someone's being silly talking about a condom. It's to know what that is if someone else is trying to pull the wool over their eyes and tell them a lie about condoms.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I have a memory, because obviously social media was not a thing when I was young.
Yeah.
And I remember in grade 8 walking to school on the north side of Brisbane, walking to school, and there was a photo, a 6x4 on the footpath on the way to school of a man's appendage, nice and close up.
Wow.
And I remember my friends and I stopped and we looked at it. We didn't pick it up. And we looked at it and we thought, that is the weirdest thing we've ever seen. And then went to school and we joked about it. But in hindsight, I'm thinking, was that a weirdo in the bushes who put that there, knowing that it's a school walk and who's going to pick it up?
and watching behind somewhere. You just don't know, do you?
That's what I think. As an adult, that's what I wonder, why that was perfectly placed in the middle of a footpath on the way to school.
Absolutely.
But now these kids will be seeing this. What, love?
We don't talk about these. We didn't talk about those things then.
No. We just thought it was strange.
Yeah. Whereas these kids would be probably quite alarmed and they would know exactly what to do, which is a good thing.
Yes, and I've always said to my children as well, if you see, for my son, I say, if you see bosoms online or you see body parts, can you come and show me where you found them? Can you just come and show me?
Absolutely.
Don't just swipe away from it.
I would be so proud of you.
Yeah, just show me where you found it so I can see the trail of where you got there. And, that's
so
that
good.
seems... Yeah, and I've said that since a young age.
Because that's part of that wraparound questions that kids ask. Now, 12, Belle, they're about to go to high school.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and remember, at 8, I always say to them, it doesn't matter if you only remember 10, 20% of what I say. There's no test afterwards because sometimes that's all they're going to remember. And because they're thinking concretely, like very literally, they're only going to remember the stuff that actually matters to them right then and there, and that they can hang on existing knowledge. So that's why we're trying to hang on existing knowledge. And I try and do that in my books.
Building.
Yeah, building blocks. 12, it's another information update in the sense that they're about to go to high school. They're about to hear things they haven't heard before, but their brain's starting to etch towards thinking more complexly. So they're about to compare themselves to other people. They're about to get exposed to other ideas, and they might dehinge from you a little bit more, from your values and ideas, and go, I wonder what that person thinks. And is my mum really right? And we've got to kind of let them explore that a little bit within the safety and the confines of our rules and boundaries at home.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So that's very age appropriate. Very good.
Okay.
So is it a myth? Is it a myth that we need to let go of about balancing honesty and protecting a child's innocence? So some people might wonder, they're too young for it. Is it a myth?
No, I don't think it's a myth. I think sometimes kids see and hear things that is overexposing them for their age. When I ran the psychology clinic, we had a little girl who had come in and seen pornography at 6 years old, and she didn't have the language to describe what she had seen. So even though in her gut she knew that it wasn't right, she kept going back to it every night because it was a link at the bottom of Moshi Monsters, I think is the correct name for that game.
My children used to play Moshi Monsters.
Yeah, and this is probably back in the day. It's probably 15 years ago now, but there wasn't the safety software we have now.
Yes.
And parents don't know how lucky they are now. They can lock down things that we could never lock down 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And while we complain about how unsafe the internet is, there's so much we can do to filter it out. And it's never 100% foolproof, but it's so much better. We can do so much better by our kids these days.
Yeah.
But she was 6. And so when you say, is it a myth to, say that there's certain things that you don't tell kids at certain ages, yes, there is certain things. You know, when you're
Yeah.
talking about certain, I don't think certain sexual positions and certain sexual things kids need to know at 6. To me, they're thinking concretely. So as we just went through, if they don't have information to hang that on, like actual like layers, right?
Yeah.
If like girls' period blood, right? I've got to explain to girls that it's not like blood when they cut themselves, because otherwise they freak out, right?
Yeah.
It's it's a mixture of the mucus and blood that their uterus finds in their body, because
It's a lining.
make a
Yeah.
blood in that, make a bed.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I've got this
Yeah.
story, you know, but I've got to explain, but I've got to use what they already know, which is blood, but they cut themselves, to explain that. Now, even trying to explain sex, which kids have got no concept of, is hard enough, let alone starting to jump further and further. So,
Yeah.
no.
Absolutely.
No.
And the other thing online is a tricky one too. Back when one of my children was not allowed on Instagram, and then she snuck it, and then her algorithm was cutting, and that was horrific for my husband and I, because the internet was very new and she didn't understand what it was because she was 12. So that was, we cut Instagram for a long time. So depending on what the children have seen or whether they've clicked on it, even for a second, tells the internet, oh, that's what this person wants to see. So let's show them more of that.
Absolutely. And all they have to do is click on it once. And I think what's important for parents to know, and we don't like to think about it, but kids are developing sexually at this age. Yeah. So curiosity is natural. And it's actually really important to validate to kids, you are going to have questions, not what questions do you have, but you are going to have questions.
They're coming.
Yeah, the research says that if kids don't have questions by the time they're 10, it's not that they don't have questions, it's that they're not comfortable asking them. So we've kind of got to get ahead of this game and go, my kid is developing sexually. They are going to be curious. We want to help them channel that curiosity to safe people and safe places. That's the key.
So what about gender curiosity? So what about a parent having a conversation about identity? So if their beliefs may differ and the child...
Yeah, and this is highly personal stuff. In the book, I talk about the biological body a child is born with, because that every parent has to deal with that, regardless of what gender children end up exploring and moving towards as they grow. So I think that has to be established. We still are dealing with the biological body a child is born with, and then we're dealing with that overlay of how a child feels about that body. I think the most important thing is that children take care of the body that they have in the process of that discovery. And I can't emphasize that enough. It breaks my heart to see kids dislike who they are and dislike their body. And this is a very specialized area, Belle, and I don't feel qualified to delve into and tell parents how to deal with this. But what I think,
and also I think that it comes down to, like you said before, research. So even if the parent disagrees and the child has ideas, I think it's important to sit down together in a safe place and look up the information. Look it up. They're not alone. This is something that many children are going through, and I think the best thing would not be to freak out or not to disagree. Just bide your time, take a breath, and do some research together with love.
And the research actually says that sexuality is so fluid at this age. And so it's nothing is fixed at this age. And kids can have an idea, it can be highly influenced by peer group. The research that really probably has stuck with me and is overarching is that when kids have, I guess, a consistent, persistent theme about who they are throughout their life, it tends to stick more.
Yeah.
But again, I think these things are highly individual. I think between 8 and 12, I think anything that's permanent, I'm like slow. I've had a lot of families in schools say, parents ring me and say, look, my child's identifying as a girl right now, as biologically a boy, and talk me through this. And then a year later, because I'm back at the school, say, oh, we've had a change. And, so it does.
And that's okay.
Change. Yeah, it does change. And,
yes.
Sometimes it's tough. So let's.
Yeah, and these are our children. This is who they are now, and this is who they could be later. Yeah. So tell me about your books. So for our listeners, where can they find your books?
Okay.
And I know you've got Puberty for Guys, Puberty for Girls.
Oh, got them.
And
shall I show you?
Yeah, show me your books.
They're on my little. Oh, I'm throwing things. Okay, here's my puberty book. This is where we started.
Oh, I love it.
They are so fun.
Like we've got Girls' Guide to Puberty, Guys' Guide to Puberty. They're beautiful illustrations too, aren't they?
Oh, they are, and they really are. Like they're full of really, fun stuff.
Gorgeous.
Really fun stuff. Bit of journal work, bit of comics in here.
Lighthearted. And so will our listeners go to your website or bookshops?
They can. And this is my latest one. Where do babies come from and other questions kids ask? So this is where there's a little bit on cyber safety. There's on identity and your family you belong to and the facts about babies. And we've got all the same type of vibe through it. And it's about making these conversations fun and bringing it back to your intro. You said it better than I could. You just nailed that.
I'll do it again for you. And I must say, congratulations. I think it's such a wonderful thing for you to write. Puberty, huge for young children and can be difficult for parents. And then where do babies come from? Such a fantastic book.
Come next. Do you think we need to do one on consent?
Yeah, please. I know that at my son's school from grade 4, they talk consent, but things still happen. Even right. So it doesn't sink into some people, and that's one thing that when I spoke to my son about consent the other day, I said to him, and I just relate it to a different conversation. I said, I'm really proud of you when I hear you sticking up for your mates when they're not around. Sometimes I hear it, and I brought that back to consent.
Absolutely.
So I was like, the other day when so-and-so said this about your other mate, and I heard you said, oh, no, he's not like that. He's fantastic. I said, same thing as you grow older with girls. I need you to pipe up like you did for this guy for a girl. Consent is so important.
On something he knows. You're layering it. He's a concrete thinker right now, and you're putting it on something concrete so he can apply it to something that's not in his life yet, which is something sexual.
Yeah. And then the other one, just going back to Bravehearts a second, we're also a foster family, and whenever I have the children, I'm always when they're in the bath and they are undressed and they're in the bath, and I always say things to them like I put the soap on their hands and say you wash those bits yourself, and I do use the words, and I'll say you do know that no one is allowed to touch that, right? You do know that? And I always say you can tell me anything, and I think that's something I hope they take with them.
Absolutely beautiful. Safety, joy, choice. That's what our listeners can take with them.
Yeah, beautiful.
What a beautiful interview, Belle. We just want people to love their kids better, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, can I throw you a curveball? This is my very last question, Michelle.
Yeah,
I ask this question to all of my guests.
All right.
I'm going to throw you.
Come on. Come on.
Michelle Mitchell.
Yes, babe.
Have you ever seen a ghost or a UFO?
No.
Both no.
No.
I'm 60% with the ghosts from guests so far.
No.
7% with the UFO.
7%? I'd say a hard no on what I would define as a ghost and a UFO.
Yeah, I'm a no on both as well.
Sorry,
but I'm so intrigued by the people that answer. I'm like, oh, these are not around for me.
No. I'd say no. Sorry, I'm boring.
No, that's not boring. You're the same as me.
I don't know.
All three of my children have seen and heard, which is why I asked the question. This is why.
But if you asked me at 10, I might have said yes.
Yeah. Yeah, little ones 10. Mine were young. The oldest was 12 at the time, and then there was a 8-year-old and then a 4-year-old, and they all had the same experience at the same time.
I said yes at 12. Would you have said yes at 12?
Mm-mm.
No, okay. Well,
no, my father passed away when I was 7, and I was very open to, seeing or hearing or feeling, but I never did.
Yeah, I wouldn't have said and I wouldn't have thought a ghost was necessarily someone who died and come back. I would have just said, I saw something scary.
Yeah.
I saw something behind the curtain,
Well, I saw lots of 80s scary movies, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, isn't that funny? Well, I guess my answer is yes, at 12 I thought I saw a ghost, and now...
Oh, did you?
Well, now at 50 I know that I didn't see a ghost. I've revised my thinking. There you go.
So at the end of the day, maybe or maybe not, Michelle saw a ghost at 12, but we're not sure.
Yeah.
Michelle, thank you so much. I've had so much fun chatting with you, and I just think it's wonderful what you're doing, and continue to do it. And I will look forward to a book on consent. I think that is going to be also huge.
I appreciate you, Belle. Thank you so much.